the radical act of choosing yourself. When no one else will, I want to tell you about someone who changed the way I see resilience, someone who taught me that survival is not the same as strength, and that choosing yourself in a world that refuses to see you is not just brave, it is revolutionary. Her name is Leba Lewis. Leba is a woman who has spent a lifetime navigating spaces that were never built to hold her, spaces that tolerated her presence but never celebrated it, spaces that whisper, "You can exist here, but do not dare to belong." And yet, she rose, not with noise, not with fanfare, but with something far more powerful, a quiet, unshakable belief in her own worth, even when the world around her suggested she had none. Leba is making the world a better place by refusing to let her story end in silence. She is giving language to the Black women and men who grew up in white spaces and never had words for the loneliness they felt. She is teaching us that self belief is not a luxury, it is survival. And she is showing us that you do not need permission to take up space in rooms that were not designed for you. Today, I want to share what I learned from my conversation with Leba because it speaks directly to the heart of what we explore here. This is about learning to be soft in a world that taught you survival. This is about releasing the cape. This is about choosing yourself, even when no one else does. Let me start with something Leba told me that I have not been able to stop thinking about. She said that growing up, she was treated like the housekeeper's daughter, not as someone who truly belonged in the family or the neighborhood. She was present, but not seen, tolerated, but not embraced. And when friendships began to form naturally, as they do when children are children, parents stepped in, white parents. They quietly, sometimes politely, made it clear that their children could not be close to her. Not because she was unkind, not because she was unworthy, but because she was Black. One story she shared stays with me. There was a young man named Rick Hoffman, someone who wanted to take her to prom. His mother said no. The reason? They don't go to our temple. It was dressed up as religion, as tradition, as anything but what it actually was: racism. Leba was denied a simple, joyful teenage experience because her Blackness made someone uncomfortable. And here's the thing: that was not an isolated incident. That was her childhood. That was her reality. Day after day, year after year, the message was clear: you are good enough to exist here, but not good enough to belong here. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment. Imagine being a child in that environment. Imagine watching other kids get invited to birthday parties you are not invited to. Imagine seeing sleepovers happen that you are quietly excluded from. Imagine knowing, even without anyone saying it out loud, that the reason is your skin. What does that do to a young person? What does that do to your sense of self? For many, we know it breaks them. It teaches them that they are less than. It makes them question their worth at the deepest level. But for Leba, it did something else. It forced her to make a choice. Whose voice would she believe? The voices around her that said she did not belong, or her own voice, the one that whispered, "You are enough." She chose herself. And that choice, that act of self belief in a hostile environment, is what I want us to talk about today. Because here's what I have learned from Leba's story and from the research I have done since our conversation. Self belief is not just a nice idea, it is not just something motivational speakers talk about on stages. It is survival. When you are constantly overlooked, when you are dismissed, when you are told in 1,000 small ways that you do not matter, believing in yourself becomes the only lifeline you have. And for Black women, especially, for those of us who have spent our lives in predominantly white spaces, or just whether that is a neighborhood, a school, a workplace, or a boardroom, self belief is the difference between thriving and disappearing. Let me tell you about a family that mirrors Leba's experience. There is a book called Overcoming the Odds by Callister Greenberg. It documents the story of a Black family that moved into an all white community. The children in that family faced the same social isolation Leba faced. They were othered at school. Friendships were strained or blocked entirely because of race. The neighborhood silence was loud, few welcomes, limited invitations, quiet resistance. Over time, the children realized that some of their peers were not allowed to visit their house or be close friends strictly because they were Black. But here's what the parents did: they intentionally taught their children self worth and pride in their Black identity to counteract the negative messages from the environment. They fostered resilience through open conversations about racism. They encouraged excellence in education and personal development. And they sought supportive networks beyond the immediate neighborhood, church, extended family, Black community spaces, creating alternative circles of belonging. The result? Those children grew into adults who understood both the costs of racism and their own capacity to rise above it. They achieved academically, they built professional lives, they proved that being overlooked did not define their ultimate outcomes. This is the blueprint. Name the racism, affirm your worth, build your own community and success, even when the environment refuses to fully see you. And that is exactly what Leba did. She did not wait for the neighborhood to choose her. She chose herself. She found inner confidence. She built relationships with people who truly saw her. She refused to shrink her Blackness to make others comfortable. And in doing so, she became a living example of what it means to thrive in spaces that were not designed for you. Now, let me be clear: this is not about pretending that racism does not hurt. It does. The emotional toll of being the only Black person in white spaces is real, it is deep, it is lasting. From parents who quietly refuse to let their white children befriend the Black kid next door, to religious or cultural excuse used to deny simple moments like going to prom together, the message is always the same: you don't belong here. And those small, constant cuts add up. They leave scars. But here's what Leba's story also shows us: that pain can forge resilience. It can create clarity about who you are. It can teach you to translate suffering into purpose, ambition, and a strong sense of self instead of internalizing the belief that you are less than. There is another story I want to share. The Stanford Library's Guide on African Americans in Children's Books references a childhood memoir about a Black girl who becomes the new Black kid in a nearly all white neighborhood. She faces peer exclusion and subtle hostility. Teachers and adults often minimize or ignore racial tensions, leaving her to interpret and absorb the daily slights on her own. The loneliness of being the only one leads to internal questioning. Am I enough? Do I belong here? But she turns to books, family stories, and Black cultural history to anchor her identity despite the surrounding environment. She learns to name the racism she encounters, which prevents her from internalizing the idea that she is the problem. Over time, she develops a powerful sense of self and uses her experiences as material for writing and advocacy. Her memoir becomes part of a broader movement to include honest Black childhood experiences in literature, giving other Black children in white spaces language for what they are experiencing. Her story inspires educators to recognize the unique emotional load carried by Black students in predominantly white schools. This is the power of naming your reality. This is the power of refusing to let others define you. And then there is the story of a biracial woman who grew up Black in New Hampshire. She reflects on the racism she experienced in small, predominantly white towns. She describes how racism shaped her childhood, being singled out, stereotyped, treated as different. Social circles were limited. Some families discouraged friendships or relationships with her because of race. She had to navigate identity confusion, being biracial, but read as Black in spaces that were overwhelmingly white. As an adult, she intentionally embraces both sides of her heritage while affirming her Black identity. She uses social media to share her story, educate others, and build a supportive community, refusing to let small town racism define her narrative. Her choice to speak openly about her experiences becomes an act of self belief and resistance. Her content resonates with many viewers who grew up as the only or one of few Black people in white towns, creating solidarity and visibility. She models how to transform painful childhood experiences into advocacy and empowerment. Do you see the pattern here? In every single one of these stories, including Leba's, the person had to choose themselves. They had to decide that their worth was not determined by the people around them. They had to build their own sense of belonging, and they had to create community in places where community was not offered to them. This is what I mean when I say self belief is survival. This is what I mean when I say you have the power to create your own belonging, even when the environment is not built for you. So here's what I want you to take away from this conversation. First, self belief can sustain you when you are constantly overlooked. Leba's story shows that choosing to believe in yourself, even when no one validates you, is not just motivational talk, it is survival. Second, everyday racism in nice white spaces leaves deep, lasting scars, but it can also forge resilience and clarity about who you are. The small, constant cuts add up, but you can learn to translate that pain into purpose, ambition, and a strong sense of self. Third, you have the power to create your own belonging. Even when the environment is not built for you, you were not chosen by the neighborhood, the schools, or the families around you. You had to choose yourself. And for Black professionals and entrepreneurs, this is a reminder we may work, lead, and build in spaces that were not designed for us, but we still have the right to take up space, to thrive, and to define ourselves on our own terms. Now, when I want to challenge you. I want you to do three things this week. First, stop normalizing spaces where Black people are present but not fully accepted. Audit the environments you move through: workplaces, schools, neighborhoods, social circles. If you recognize you are tolerated but not embraced, start naming that reality instead of gaslighting yourself. Second, choose one concrete act of self belief this week in a space where you feel overlooked. Speak up in a meeting where you usually stay quiet. Attend an event where you have felt out of place, but go as your full, unapologetic self. Have a courageous conversation with someone who has minimized you. Write it down, commit to it. Notice how it feels to stand in your own worth. Third, intentionally build one relationship or community that truly sees you. Invest in spaces that affirm your Blackness: a mentor, a mastermind group, a Black professional association, a group chat where you do not have to code switch. Creating this circle is part of surviving and thriving when the wider environment is still catching up. I want you to feel seen. I want you to feel validated. If you grew up in or work in mostly white spaces, I want you to know that your quiet, unspoken experiences are real and worth talking about. The loneliness, the blocked friendships, the you are good enough to serve but not to belong messages, they are real. And I want you to feel softly empowered, not hyped up, but grounded. Like you can breathe a little deeper and say, I survived more than people know. And that means I am stronger than I realized. And I want you to feel gently hopeful. Healing and success are possible. Believing in yourself is not naive, it is necessary. Leba Lewis chose herself, and in doing so, she became a woman who refuses to shrink, a woman who takes up space, a woman who defines herself on her own terms. So I will leave you with this. Whose voice will you believe? The voices around you that say you do not belong, or your own voice, the one that whispers, you are enough. Choose yourself. You deserve to be seen. And if no one else sees you, see yourself first, because the world does not get to decide your worth. You do. And that is the most radical act of all.